Now, I hope you had a good night's rest last night after we got all of the high school students to bed. We were able to rest as well, and I did not expect that last night. Because normally when we travel like this, the first night we sleep the entire night, 10, 12 hours, and then the second night is really hard. This was a good night. So I'm planning on going all the way to 1 o'clock right now with all the energy that I have. So I won't do that. Two wonderful things are happening right now. Number one is the fulfillment of every preacher's dream in a conference like this. And that is that it's raining right now. There's nothing else you can do except be here and listen to me. And the other thing is we have the incredible privilege of working our way verse by verse through an entire book of the Bible together as believers in Christ Jesus, with immense differences between us and the teams we cheer for and the countries we come from and our backgrounds. But we have one thing in common, that is the person of Christ, and what He has done for us and what He is doing for us in our lives, not just in our lives, but in our families and our marriages. I don't remember seeing a group this size with this many children. And the joy that that brings, as well as the challenges, as we watch you do what we did for so many years with 6 children and soon to be 15 grandchildren. And we're going to go to the book of the Bible this morning, once again, the book of Song of Solomon, and learn a little bit more, encourage us, strengthen us in our individual lives, of course, but especially in our family lives. God has given us an entire book of the Bible in poetic form to describe what is so precious in His sight, the husband-wife relationship. We could spend all of our time talking about techniques for raising kids and biblical principles for that. That's important. We'll do that in our workshop this morning and tomorrow as well. But it all begins with the husband-wife relationship. Children are not the center of our lives or our families. Children come and children go, but God has intended for our relationship to continue until death do us part. Perhaps for that reason, He gives us an entire book of the Bible which has that theme. The seasons of boundless love, as we saw last night. The Song of Solomon is a love story. It's a love story in photos, as though we were leafing through the photo album of the history of Solomon and Shulamite, the perfect couple in the sense that she is the completion of him and he is the completion of her, and together they find peace, something that is lacking in so many families nowadays. Now, we've had a chance to have meals with several of you already and ask the question, how did you meet? With Donald and Hian. We heard a little bit about their story tonight. This morning. Well, tonight for us, actually. My wife and I also have a love story. Believe it or not, there was a time when I had hair. Many, many years ago. Our story began, in fact, in a dysfunctional home, which was mine, in a very godly family, missionary family, that arrived in Brazil in 1963. When I was a student at Cedarville University in Ohio, and I became very good friends with a fellow soccer player for the university team named David Cox, Jr. I went to the school with a hunger in my heart to know more about what is a real Christian home. I won't go into the details of the things that happened in my family growing up, but I, till today, have the custom of sleeping with a pillow scrunched over my head, making a sandwich out of my head, because I wouldn't hear the yelling and the screaming in my own family. I cried myself to sleep at night as a young person, desiring that God would change my family. But in fact, God was doing something else. He was changing me. And instead of rebelling against the hypocrisy, because we were in church every Sunday, nobody imagined the things that took place in our home, but I would console myself reading the scriptures, especially Revelation chapters 20, 21, and 22. And God used that like he did in Joseph's life, things that others intended for evil, God for good, that he would save many people. And so he planted in my young life, my young heart, a desire for a godly family. In the 70s, there was hardly anything written about the family. I remember reading, I think, a book by Jay Adams on the Christian home, one or two others. But my hungry heart wanted to see a model. I didn't know any. When we were in college, my friend, co-captain of the soccer team, would share with me about his family in Brazil. I thought, oh, this is not Brazil. That's got to be Mars. Nobody does the kinds of things that you're talking about in your family. I had already gone to Africa with a soccer team and loved it, fell in love with missions and being outside of the United States and feeling like God could use me. And he did use that trip to call me into missionary service. But I felt like I want to do an internship in a Christian family. I want to see how it works. I've never seen this. And my friend would talk about his family. He said, I need to go to Brazil. And then one day he showed up at soccer practice with a picture of his sister. And I said, I really want to go to Brazil. So I asked for permission from Dave Cox Jr.'s father, Dave Cox Sr., the founder of Word of Life Bible Institute in Brazil, to spend 8 weeks in the summer just to get to see how his family worked. And this man of God, this visionary dreamer, promptly responded to me promptly. In those days, it was 3 weeks for the mail to get back and forth. And he said, no. Our family isn't all together. I don't think the experience would be worthwhile. But privately, he said to his wife, if the name of this other Dave begins to appear in our daughter's letters, then I may change my mind. And little did I imagine, as we began to develop a friendship, and she wrote back to her parents, my friend said, write again and ask again. And I did. I'd like my wife to share a little bit more about how things went from there. And just like the Song of Solomon, some of the tensions that arose. That way you don't have to ask us about how we met, and we can just ask you about how we met when we have meals together.
Well, I went to Cedarville University. I arrived in the winter because I had studied in Brazil. In Brazil, the school system, the school year goes from May to December. And so I arrived leaving sunny, warm, beautiful Brazil to gray, cold, yucky Ohio. But my brother had arranged for 2 of his friends to pick me up at JFK Airport in New York in case my connecting flight to Albany were delayed because I was going up to my grandparents' house. And I said, are you kidding me? I didn't want to be in the States in the first place, much less go 4 or 5 hours in a car with 2 guys I'd never met before. So I'm like, please don't let my flight be late. I don't want to miss this connection.
I was praying, oh, please let her flight be late.
His prayer was more effective than mine. And my flight was late, and we got to go in the car for 4 or 5 hours up to Spring Lake, New York, way upstate New York. But it was friendship. All he did was tease me the whole way up there, which was about the best thing he could do. I have 2 brothers, and Brazilians are notorious for teasing, so I was used to that. So we developed a friendship, and his sister became my best friend at school, so that worked out really well. And so it was at this point that he decided to write to my dad and say, could I do an internship in Brazil? And at that point, my dad was going to have 1 child at home. The rest of us would be in the States for the summer, and that's why he said no. But we started developing more and more of a friendship and an interest, and so I started writing about this new friend that I had. And I said, Dave, write to my dad again. He said, are you kidding? You already told me no. I said, no, write to him again. I know my dad. And so he did. My dad said, yes, come. Come here. And so Dave spent 8 weeks out in Brazil. I did not go. But that's how we started. He went back to the States from Brazil with permission for us to start dating. And so we had a very wonderful, easy, fun relationship until it got to the point where we were going to become engaged. Now, all of this was a surprise to me because Dave knew that I wanted to get engaged while still in college. I wanted it to be a surprise, And he knew all these dreams, so he's very creative. And he put in this whole process, this whole thing that would take several weeks to lead up to an engagement, and I was oblivious to what was going on. But he made a very big mistake. And it was a mistake from lack of communication, which is so often in relationships that we have misunderstandings because communication isn't clear. And Dave understood when my dad gave permission for us to date, it was for us to date, to get engaged, to get married, the whole works. And so so he wrote to my parents informing them when we would be getting engaged, and that didn't sit very well with my dad. And my dad wrote back and said, no, you need to ask permission to get engaged, and then we'll talk about it. The big problem was Dave had already been in Brazil, and he had totally convinced my parents how much he loved me, and that they were sure about him. They weren't so sure about me, because when they had last seen me, I hadn't even met him. So, letters, it's really hard to communicate really well just in letters. I said, we know about him, but I don't know if Carol Sue's really there. She's ready. We'll be in the States in a few months, and then, we get engaged after that. So, with all of this, they had to share with me what was going on, and I was devastated. It's like, how can the people I love the most be the ones who are shattering all of my dreams? And, they're going to come, and then it's not going to be a surprise. Of course, I'm going to be suspicious of everything, but we did a cassette tape, and we sent it to my parents so that we could communicate talking instead of just through letters. And we just affirmed that even though this was so painful and so difficult, we knew better than to go against their wishes, and that we would submit and we would do what they were asking, even though it meant giving up our dreams. And something in that cassette tape convinced my parents, you know what? I think this is right. I think this is good. So my dad wrote 2 letters, one to me saying, no, you wait, and one to him, go ahead, do something, be creative. So he was, and we ended up, and it turned out being even better than it would have been originally. But when he did ask me to marry him, and gave me the engagement ring, my first words was, but we can't. So then he explained it all. But that was our bump in the road, and all our relationships have those, and that's probably as far as I can go, right?
That's good. After that, 6 children, 15 grandchildren.
We got married first.
And we lived happily ever after, with a few bumps in the road. Of these 35 years, it's been 30 of the best years of my life. No, it's been a good journey, but with bumps in the road, as we shared last night, God has graciously given us these children and grandchildren. But I think the principle I call it 50-20 principle, Genesis 50-20, which I already quoted. Things that others perhaps meant for evil, God can use to transform for good. And so that passion that he placed in my heart and the stability that he gave to my wife of generations of faithful servants, missionaries, pastors, he's put together for us to have a passion for people like yourselves, especially for younger couples with younger children and trying to balance all of the demands of life, and many of you in the military service and having a son and a daughter-in-law and 3 grandchildren who are living that same life, and trying to encourage here and around the world with biblical principles, not just in spite of the difficulties in a world that's been racked by sin, but often because of those, because our God in his providence and his sovereignty can transform what seems so difficult in wonderful blessing for others. And when we come to the love story of Solomon and his future spouse, we see some of these same principles in their story. Even though we don't have all of the details, some of you came in last night and we did not have a chance to catch our brief introduction, but the structure of this book is really that of vignettes, photos, snapshots, which don't fill in all the details. We need to do that as we read along, and we'll be doing some of that today. Now, for those of you who were still awake last night, we learned 3 words which summarize the book, and we learned them through symbols. So get your hands free. We're going to do those again. Last one didn't come. The Song of Solomon in 3 words. Number 1, the word is patience. True love waits. Those who eat fast eat raw. from our Brazilian quotation. Time is always an ally in true godly relationships. God is above time. So there is no need for us to rush relationship. And true love is patient in its dealing one with the other, as we read in 1 Corinthians chapter 13. In second place, we see that true love is pure. Purity, say it with me. Purity. It preserves itself both before and after marriage, as we will see in this book. So love is what we have. Patience, purity, and perseverance. And this is the big message of the whole book. Biblical marriage is each for the other and both for God. The idea is that in an equal yoke, God joins husband and wife in an unbreakable, indissoluble marital commitment. Not as an end in itself. Marriage is not the final purpose of the universe. The family is not the final purpose. We live in days in which we're trying to rescue again biblical family principles. But we don't go too far. We don't take the pendulum all the way to the other side so that our little relationship is the center of the universe. Our little family or big family. The fact is that God created marriage as a reflection of His glory. The very triunity of our God, 3 in 1, reflected by the 2 in 1 relationship. And together we cultivate the fields of the world for His glory, each for the other, both for God. Family is not the end. It's not the final purpose. It is a purpose in the grand scheme. Now, there's some challenges that we encounter when we look at the book of Song of Songs. And very briefly, I don't want to get too technical. That would make this into a class, and that's not really what we're doing here. But there are so many ways that people have interpreted this book. For example, many today think that it is a simple anthology, a collection of assorted love poems which are dedicated to Solomon, who had 1,000 wives, 1,000 women anyway, and not really a storyline. Now, there is some truth to that idea. The Song of Solomon, although it is one song, the greatest of all, like the Holy of Holies, Lord of Lords, King of Kings, Song of Songs. It's the best of all, but it is one song, composed of many stanzas and a few choruses, as we saw last night. So there is some truth to this idea of a collection of stanzas, but I understand that there's a storyline that accompanies them. Now, over the years, allegory has been the predominant method because we are so afraid of treating delicate subjects like sexuality and romance in the church that people have reserved all of these to be figures of speech to describe deeper meanings. But there is absolutely no control over that kind of interpretation. And so we create all sorts of amazing images which preach well but don't have much meaning in real life. The allegorical method has been rejected over the years. Typology is very close, where we will take images in the book and say that they represent something in the life of Christ, but that also lends itself oftentimes to fanciful interpretation. An interesting way of interpreting the book is as though it were a drama. Like Greek and Roman dramas, which would come many, many years later. They were really not a part of Jewish culture. And some even see, instead of Solomon and the Shulamite, they see a third person, some anonymous shepherd who is the real love of the Shulamite, and Solomon is in fact the bad guy, the antagonist in the story, trying to steal the heart of the shepherdess who has given herself to the shepherd. The problem is you have no idea who's speaking where and what throughout the book. It's a very difficult interpretive scheme. What I think we have in the book of Song of Solomon is lyric poetry. It's a song, a unified song, that tells a story. A poem with a storyline, but that is significant in the scriptures by analogy. And here I need to explain what I understand that the book of Song of Solomon is not about Jesus and the church. I hope that doesn't upset you. But the book of Solomon is about Jesus and the church. Did you catch that? There's a little problem there. It doesn't directly speak to Jesus and the church or Father, Son, and Holy Spirit in an eternal love relationship. But marriage does. The husband-wife relationship. As we mentioned last night and studied together 2 years ago, the few of you who were here 2 years ago in this very same camp retreat, family retreat. The husband-wife relationship was created and imbued by God with reflective powers to show how unity in diversity, covenant faithfulness, differences in our role relationships explain in part the very Trinity of God Himself. That God created man and woman in His image to reflect His image, to reproduce worshipers in spirit and in truth, our children, and to take that to the end of the world as we represent His rule. Marriage and family is the principal illustration that God uses to describe Himself and Jesus' love for the church. All of that to say that the book of Song of Songs does not speak directly about Jesus and the church or the Trinity, but because marriage and family are so vital in the world's scheme of reflecting God's glory, He devotes an entire book to talk about the importance of your marriage, your relationship, in a poetic way. In other passages, the epistles, He does this through declarative statements and declarations, indicatives that describe the relationship of Jesus and the church. But in Song of Songs, He does this in a figurative, poetic, and beautiful way. And so Christ, in the Song of Solomon, we see because marriage and human sexuality are to be protected as a reflection of the Trinity and Jesus' love for the church. Human sexuality was totally distorted at the fall and needs to be redeemed by Jesus. And here's where we also see a reflection of Christ in the other-centered life. Marriage is not 50-50. Marriage, if need be, is 100-0 and 100-0. I don't marry you because you make me happy. Happiness is not a God-given right of every human being. We marry because we believe that we can serve one another in an other-centered, Christ-centered union, each for the other, and both for God. Marriage then becomes an instrument to reflect the very glory of God, to serve His kingdom here on the earth. Other-centeredness is the true description of biblical marriage. It is a reflection of the life of Christ in us. Not I, but Christ. Jesus did not come to be served, but to serve and to give His life. And so Christian marriage then becomes perhaps the greatest vehicle for us to demonstrate the other-centeredness of the very life of Jesus. And we see that in the book of Song of Solomon. Even in an age before the coming of the Spirit, before the coming of Christ, we see prefigured, not taught directly, but indirectly, in an entire book of the Bible about marriage. I think the way we can illustrate this, and we did a couple of years ago, I believe that marriage is like a full moon. The moon has no glory of its own. There's no light source emanating from the moon. Any light that the moon has is borrowed light. It comes from the sun. And so the more that we have a moon directing its gaze, if we could say it that way, toward the sun, the more glory of the sun it reflects. That fits so well for Christian marriage. The more we turn ourselves to the only source of light, Jesus, the more we reflect the glory of the sun. And that's what God is like. That people would look at our relationship and get a glimpse of God's relationship, of His other-centered love for the church. Having said all that, we need to dive into the book. Because we want to get all the way to chapter 2, verse 7. Open your Bible in the Song of Songs, chapter 1. The title, we've already mentioned, it begins this way, the Song of Songs, which is Solomon's. What we need to understand, first of all, this is not a collection of an assortment of diverse, disconnected musical poetry. We have one song considered the best of all of Solomon's songs, as in the phrase, the Holy of Holies, the Lord of Lords, the King of Kings. This is the best of all. Now, here's the question. What makes this song the best of all of Solomon's 1,005 songs? We read in 1 Kings chapter 4:32 that Solomon wrote 3,000 proverbs and 1,005 songs. We only have 3 of his songs in the scriptures. Psalm 72, Psalm 127, perhaps Psalm 45, we're not sure, and the Song of Songs. Well, the Song of Solomon is singular. It is unique among all romantic songs. And you know that most poetry and most music is written about relationships, romantic relationships, right? I love you eternally, at least as long as it lasts. I love you as much as I love my hunting dog and my truck, if you listen to country music. Of course, as soon as you turn your back on me, I hate you as much as I hate whatever. The music of the world is most often, 80% perhaps of all country music, whatever kind of music you like, is about relationships. But this song is singular in the way it exalts a God-given romance. Now the verse says, the Song of Songs, which is Solomon's, or literally to Solomon. But that phrase can be translated different ways. Is it for Solomon, by Solomon, or in honor of Solomon? Almost everything points to the fact that this is by Solomon. That creates other problems for us when we know a little bit about the author's romantic history throughout his life. Solomon is mentioned by name numerous times in the book. We know he composed 1,005 songs. Everything in the book reveals a lifestyle of opulence and tranquility, which describe the golden reign of Solomon. He talks so much about flora and fauna of Palestine, of the Promised Land. All of that is consistent with Solomonic authorship. But here's the problem. How in the world can a man who had 700 wives and 300 concubines write the Song of Songs about true, individual, exclusive, lifelong commitment in marriage? It doesn't seem to make sense. Well, some people have offered explanations. I'm trying to convince my wife about one of these, but I'm not sure that I've been successful yet. The bottom line is we don't know. But some possible explanations. Number one, just like the book of Ecclesiastes, which talks about true meaning in life. How can we squeeze meaning out of the dry rocks of the desert sands of our lives? Well, in Ecclesiastes, Solomon could try everything. He is really the only one who could do just about everything possible to try to find meaning and significance in life, and it still wasn't enough. He could write about that. Well, a man who had all of these romantic experiences in life, perhaps well after his experience with Shulamite, could be the person who could most exalt what he once had and then lost. Another possibility, if Ecclesiastes was written early in his reign, it could reflect, not Ecclesiastes, a Song of Solomon, yes, was written early in his reign, it may very well reflect his first love, his only true love, which would explain why he spent the rest of his life after losing the Shulamite, again, speculations, an early death, trying to recapture what he had at one point and then lost. Shulamite and her loyal love actually are the focus of the book. As we said last night, she is the true heroine in all of this. There is mention in chapter 6, verse 8 of a harem where he mentions 60 other queens in the palace. And we wonder, did he already have 60 other wives? Well, some commentators suggest that these actually may be the wives of the wedding party. 60 valiant men who accompany him to seek the Shulamite on their wedding day may very well be those who accompanied him in the battle. In the end, we really aren't sure, but the authorship of Solomon seems to be unanimous, at least in conservative circles. Now, we need to plunge in. On page 1 of your syllabus, Boundless, true love according to Solomon, the seasons of boundless love. We're going to look through this realistic cycle of events which describe what is typical, true, of almost all of our relationships. Dennis Rainey, in his book, Ministry with Families in the 21st Century, describes some of these periods which are normal and natural, and some of them we have in the book of Song of Solomon. Starting with dating engagement. As the book opens, we're at the door, the threshold of the wedding. For 3 chapters, the tension builds as each desires the other, and yet patience and purity must reign. But we come to the wedding day. Newly married, recently returned from a wonderful honeymoon. We see that in chapters 5 and 6. Not in the book of Song of Solomon, but in our lives, when God allows. Family life with young children. Family life with teenagers. Family life with the empty nest. Family life with grandchildren, and even culminating with widowhood, the loss of a spouse. These are natural cycles in our lives. Many, if not most of us, will go through these. And the book of Song of Solomon opens with a similar description, but really related to the period leading up to marriage. The first thing we discover is the reality and the necessity of mutual attraction. These are the seasons of love. Look at chapter 1, verses 2 through 4. Here's how the text begins. We're just going to start explaining and applying verse by verse through chapter 2, verse 7. The book actually begins, the book of the Bible, with these words: "Let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth. For your love," this is a word that's used 39 times in the book of Songs of Solomon, out of 61 times in the whole Old Testament. But it's not just altruistic love, I love you, I'll do something for you. This is intimate physical love. It's the idea of caresses. What she is saying is, I desire him. He desires me. It's not that they're practicing sex at this point. It's the reality of every relationship that is not considered platonic. Because God is the creator of sexual love. God is the one who created that chemical attraction between man and woman in normal circumstances, which draws us together. God wants this. God desires this. God himself is the author of pleasure. This does not come from hell. This is from God. Now, we all know that instinctively, but for some reason in the church, we're afraid to talk about this. And so we let the world talk. From Sunday afternoon to Saturday night. And then when we have a chance to teach our young people and to express biblical principles for love, sex, and marriage, we're silent. Well, verse 2 continues. Your love is better than wine. Your anointing oils are fragrant. Your name is oil poured out. Therefore, virgins love you. You know what she's saying here? This goes all through the whole book. You are so attractive physically and spiritually. Because when she describes his name as being perfume poured out, name in the scriptures designates character, the very essence of the person. It's not just that he was this handsome, incredible, attractive man. but he has character. This is the perfect blend. Beauty is certainly in the eyes of the beholder. She is attracted to him in two spheres. And the one that lasts, as we all know, is the man. Character. Because the law of entropy is inevitable. All things and all people tend to break down. And as we journey through our lives and accumulate the scars and the bad knees and the bad back and the cataracts in the eyes and all of the other wrinkles and gray hair and big nose and growing ears and everything else that accompany old age, what lasts is the perfume of character. Bodily exercise is a good thing. My wife and I have exercised together. Yesterday we ran about 30 minutes out on the trails. Great trails here to go out and walk and exercise if the rain stops. It will stop as soon as I finish the message at this point. The rain will stop, the sun will come out, and we'll all be able to play outside. Bodily exercise is wonderful, but it's not eternal. So she goes on, describing the life cycle of a relationship which should not end after the wedding day. And she says this in verse 3. Draw me after you. Let us run. Now here she's going against the very message which will summarize the first part of the book. Patience. Wait. She says, I don't want to wait. I want what I want now. That is the characteristic of every young person in immaturity who wants what he or she wants when he or she wants it. Now. Draw me after you. Let us run. Let's get this over with. The king has brought me into his chambers. Now that sounds promiscuous, but that's not the case. If it were chambers singular, it might be. But the idea is she wants to be where he is. She's at his house. That's a good thing. We've often counseled young people as they're developing their relationship to spend as much time as possible, each one in the home of the other. For example, those 8 weeks that I spent in Brazil were absolutely fundamental for the rest of these 35 years of marriage. Because I discovered so much about the background of my wife. And so as much time as our young people can spend in the home under supervision, but of the other, the intended, the less problems of adaptation will take place later on. At this point, the second part of verse 4, we encounter another season of boundless love, which is reflected not only in this engagement period, but throughout our lives. There was already a little idea of tension when she said, for this reason, the virgins love you. There are other people who have interest in Solomon as well. And we discover who some of them might be in verse 4, the second part, when the word me becomes the word we. Look at verse 4. We will exult and rejoice in you, masculine singular, him. We will extol your love, same word used in verse 2. Your caresses, more than wine, same thing that she said. Rightly do they love you. We have competition in the palace. The damsels, not in distress, but in desire, also are after Solomon. Now, perhaps you in your relationship experience the same thing. Competition, intimidation, and she is intimidated. Third parties who worm their way into our relationship. This started in Genesis chapter 3. Fascinating. Shortly after the honeymoon of the couple, when Genesis 2:25 says, and the man and his wife, both of them, were naked and were not ashamed. The very next verse drives a wedge between the couple as Satan comes, Genesis chapter 3, verse 1, and whispers in the ear of the woman. You're already subverting the divine order of male leadership, of female encouragement. It drives a separation between the two, a third party who is intent on defacing, vandalizing God's image. That war continues till today. Interference. Third party intruders in the husband-wife relationship. The internet, our phones, chat rooms, pornography. Did you know that many couples divorce because of video games? Did you know that Facebook is a factor in 20% of all divorces? The mall, shopping center, soccer or sports, whatever they may be, television, friends, hobbies, even involvement in ministry. We have people who hide themselves from one another in serving God. And so we need to be vigilant about everything and anything that could possibly drive a wedge between us, including our own children, because they are so good at whispering in the ear of mom or of dad. Not that they're the devil, although sometimes. And separating us, finding the weakest link. Mom, can I do such and such? Dad already said no, but I'm going to try mom. And then I pit mom and dad against one another. Attraction leads to interference, which leads to insecurity. Now look at what she says in response. Verses 5 through 7. She's intimidated. And she says this. I am very dark, but lovely. You kind of get a sense of schizophrenia here. She recognized that she has a natural beauty, but she lives in a palace in which pale, white, never see the sun skin is exalted. Now, the times we've come to Korea, I've found it fascinating to see. So we have some Korean women here, and some of you can help me understand this, but even when we've gone out on hikes on Jeju Island and around here, how the women use head coverings and cover their arms because pale white is valued. Is that correct? Yes? Am I stepping in that? And she lives in the same kind of a world. But she's a worker. She's from the country. We learn from the book that she's been outside working diligently to satisfy her half-brothers, to provide for her family. These are worthy tasks, but she's got calluses on her hands. She hasn't been doing all the beauty treatment. Look what she says. As she's intimidated and insecure, I am very dark but lovely, O daughters of Jerusalem. They're the ones who just got done challenging her. Like the tents of Kedar, that's from the country, black tents. Like the curtains of Solomon, that's from the palace. She combines the two worlds. Do not gaze at me because I am dark. Don't stare at me. Don't look at me like that. Don't turn your nose up at me. She explains my mother's sons. If we're talking about her brothers, she would have said her brothers. But it looks like they're half-brothers, step-brothers. Their involvement is not all bad. The work that they made her do seems to have been a discipline that she would cultivate and develop some character qualities. We'll see that at the end of the book. But they were angry with her. It's interesting, the Hebrew word for angry is they were hot with her. Because she's describing the work she did in the hot sun. They made me keeper of the vineyards, but my own vineyard I have not kept. In other words, she was out working and toiling and providing for her family, but she didn't have time to do all the beauty treatments. Her nails weren't done. Her hair wasn't done. Her skin wasn't done. So stop looking at me. She's insecure, and they're challenging her. They want the love of Solomon. Now, all of us have passed through those things. I remember when I came back from Brazil with permission to date my wife, remember the story she told about when she landed in the United States, and I was there to get her with another friend. We drove up to her grandfather's house. Her grandfather is the founder of this ministry that Mike and I and we work for called Word of Life. He was a great evangelist of the likes of Billy Graham. They were friends, partners during the early years of their ministries. He preached to stadiums, Yankee Stadium, 50,000 people to hear her grandfather, Jack Wordson, preach. I was just a country boy. I didn't know about the Word of Life empire. I went into Jack Wordson's house. I saw this man, the camps and the properties and the buildings, and I was intimidated. It was love at first sight on my part from JFK Airport till that moment. But then I went into depression. Why? Because I was intimidated like she felt. In fact, when I walked into the foyer of Jack Wordson's house, I saw one of those address book things. People don't do that as much anymore, but a guest book. You know, we have the name and address, and you write a little note. And I started leafing through that before I signed my name in that book. And I saw things like this. Neil Armstrong, address, the moon. First man to walk on the moon. Then I looked, Dr. Jerry Falwell, Liberty Mountain, the founder of Liberty University. And then I wrote my little name, David Merkh, Berlin, New Jersey. Nobody. That's something of how the Shulamite felt. That insecurity. Because she was different than the others. How could he possibly love her? And that leads us then to another interference on the part of these women of Jerusalem. Verse 7. In her insecurity, she cries out to him, "Tell me, you whom my soul loves," Solomon, "where you pastured your flock? Where did you go? You brought me to the palace. I'm here all by myself, surrounded by these damsels in desire. Where are you?" Well, he went out to take care of his flocks. We know that Solomon had many flocks. "Where is it that you make it lie down at noon? For why should I be like one who veils herself beside the flocks of your companions?" That's a little hard to understand. What she says is, I don't want to be a playgirl. A veiled woman in those days was a prostitute. I can't go out looking for you in the midst of all of the flocks and the shepherds who have you know what reputation. Rescue me! Where are you? Well, at this point, another voice comes into the text. Some erroneously believe that this is Solomon. But in fact, it is the women of the court who say this to her, verse 8. "If you don't know, O most beautiful among women," sarcastically, "follow in the tracks of the flock, pasture your young goats beside the shepherd's tents." This isn't Solomon saying to her, oh, playfully, "Well, if you don't know, come and find me, here I am." This is the other women of Jerusalem. One of the reasons I believe that is because this phrase, "almost beautiful of women," is only used 3 times in the book of Song of Solomon. And the other 2 times are used by the women of Jerusalem. They're provoking her. They're telling her to do exactly what she doesn't do. Why don't you just go follow the goat trails and you'll find your lovers? It's interference. Once again, the text reminds us. True biblical love must be protected against outside interference. In our years of working with couples, especially young couples, even seminary couples, some of the obstacles that we have seen of interference come from those whom we most love. The umbilical cord, in-laws, and others. I thought maybe you could share a little bit about that.
We have seminary couples. Some of them come from families whose parents don't believe in the Lord, or others who do, but maybe haven't learned God's principles well, and oftentimes they want to interfere in the young couple's lives, either in how they train their children or in all sorts of different areas. Maybe they're helping to foot the bill at the seminary, and so they feel like they have the right to run their kid's marriage or something like that. And oftentimes it will be the husband's mother who who will really, really give his wife a hard time. And we have tried to help many of these men to learn how to, in an honoring way, protect his wife. Doesn't mean that you go against your parents, but you protect that relationship. These mothers who will give presents to the son, to the grandchildren, but totally ignore the daughter-in-law, or who will come and stay in the home for a week and try to take over and tell her how to run her home, and no, you can't cook like that, or you can't clean like this, or all of this other stuff. And oftentimes the husband will not even say a word to protect his wife from the criticisms of his own mother. Another danger is the child-centered parenting, in which the child is literally the center at all times of the day. We were invited a couple years ago to a family retreat in Brazil. The pastor said, "Could you please talk to the parents who keep their children, have them sleeping with them all the time? In the middle of them, we're talking about 8, 9-year-old kids still sleeping with their parents, and just the whole dynamic of the family that revolves around the parent-child relationship instead of the husband-wife relationship coming after the person-God relationship."
I'll talk a little bit more about that in our workshop. But this section of the book then ends in this, the seasons of love, in which love already proves itself to be boundless. Finally, he steps in. And we have resolution of this first crisis in their relationship as we look at verses 9 through 11. Now, there's some stuff in here that we just don't understand what's going on because of the figures of language. Poetry involves condensing long and beautiful thoughts in little space through figurative language. Look what he says now as he responds to the interference, to her insecurity in the context of attraction. He says to her, "I compare you, my love, to a mare among Pharaoh's chariots." Now, I do not suggest that you use that form of praise to your spouse. You are like a big horse. It doesn't work. Now, what is he actually saying here? He says, you are enticing. You are unique among women. Some people mistakenly understand that he's saying, you're just like this beautiful white mare prancing about in Pharaoh's enormous stables. Like so many other mares, but you are the most beautiful. That's not what he's saying. Because Pharaoh's chariots were not drawn by female horses, mares, but by stallions. You know what he's saying? Lady, when you arrive, heads turn. You're like a single female, beautiful reporter who walks into the middle of the NFL locker room to do interviews. Do you get it? You're exciting. You're provocative. You're unique. I love you. Now, beauty is in the eyes of the beholder. She's already said, according to the standards of her day, she was not the everything. But in his eyes, beauty is in the eyes of the beholder. She turns heads. She's unique. We're going to notice in the next section how often they go back and forth with this kind of mutual appreciation and praise. Her insecurity is calmed by genuine, it's not flattering, by genuine appreciation. Your cheeks are lovely with ornaments. Your neck with strings of jewels. When he talks about the neck in this book, he's talking not about physical beauty. Later on, he says your neck is like a tower of Damascus. He's not saying you look like a giraffe, woman. What he's saying is you are noble. You are dignified. The neck. Remember how God condemned Israel because they had a stiff neck, stubborn? But her neck was part of the beauty of her character. Once again, we see the union of physical beauty and godly character. Verse 11 then shows the impact that his praise has on her. Me turns to we yet again. And this chorus of women from the courts of Jerusalem say this: we will make for you ornaments of gold studded with silver. Wait a second. What's going on here? That same group of people who are against her, who are competing with her, when they hear his public words of praise for her, all of a sudden they say, hey, we're on the wrong side of this deal. We better get on the Shulamite side. And they say, we're going to make you ready for your wedding day. You know the simple lesson that comes from even this little verse? When a husband publicly declares or demonstrates that he only has eyes for one woman, he immediately distracts the competition. But when we, men or women, complain about our spouse, exemplify frustration, dissatisfaction, we open the door for competitors to creep in. Years ago, our church had pajama night for the women. And so the gals would get together, they'd spend the whole night together, and eat pizza and play games and sit in their groups and talk. And my wife would come back and I'd say, how was your night? I'd take care of all the kids, just like a wonderful, not get quite as good as you, but I mean, I tried. I won't get to that level probably for a long time. I don't want to. But
I feel sad about that.
It was okay, but you know, the women, they just all sat around complaining about their husbands, and I just didn't have anything to say. Well, that's not exactly what she said. I wish that's what she could have said, but so sadly, that's what happens sometimes when we get together. Oh, my wife does this, my wife does that. Oh, my husband, he doesn't do this and he doesn't do that. But that's not the case. It's one woman, one man, together for one lifetime. One of the things we learn in love is patient. Through each and every phase, it enjoys. We've been encouraging our last daughter now to pass through this phase. Enjoy every stage. Those who eat fast, eat raw. Love waits for the right person at the right time. We need to teach this to our kids. Follows a natural progression without haste. Marriage is not for everyone. We err as married people trying to get everyone else married. God calls some to be single and serve God that way. We don't have the choice to marry and then leave our spouse to do other things and come back from time to time. Even those of you who are in the service and are deployed, today in this technological age, we can do like our son did when he was in Kuwait for 7 months, 10 days after our first granddaughter, their first child was born. 2 o'clock in the morning in Kuwait, he woke up every night to talk via Skype for an hour with his wife, to pray with her, to read Bible stories with their 11-day-old daughter, to have what we call sofa time. We'll be talking about that. We did a couple of years ago, and we'll repeat that here. It's possible nowadays, even when you're distant from one another, to be present with one another. But you don't get married with the intention of living single. Love, sex, and marriage are not the chief goals in life, but serve the greater purpose of God's glory. Marriage and family are not the end, but it means the end. That leads us to this big idea. The lesson, true love grows. And that's what we're going to see now through the book. In fact, this next passage, we just have a few minutes, but I want to already get into this next section of the book, starting in verse 12, chapter 1, verse 12, because we see this growth of true love and the other-centeredness of love through the seasons of life in the midst of patience. Kind of like this. Love is like a rose It cannot be forced to open. It needs time to develop. If you take that rosebud and try to dissect it, you destroy it. It's impossible for you to start to open up and cut and peel away the petals without destroying the beauty of the rose, which needs time. That's what we discover in these next verses. You can flip over in your booklets, several pages. Page 2, but several pages later. The growth of love comes through mutual appreciation. It's a very simple passage with some figures of language, but I want to show you how to get past that. I must have made a mistake when I sent the syllabus here. It's not the CNA, but the DNA of love. Okay, so change that in your booklets. The DNA of love. Here's what happens. Having passed through these initial stages, their love grows through a sequence, what I call the DNA of love, of mutual appreciation by the Shulamite for Solomon, by Solomon for the Shulamite, her to him to her to him, and then the passage concludes with the chorus. Don't wake up love until it's time. Here's the point. Theirs is an other-centered love, totally focused on the attributes and the qualities of character of the other. That should grow. This reminds me of what we read about in the book of Revelation. You have lost your first love. What do you do when you lose your first love? Go back, repent, repeat, return. One of the things we do with couples who come for counseling. And they sit on the sofa in our living room, and one's on one side and the other's on the other side. Yes, how can we help you? And then it begins. One points the finger at the other, and the other points the finger at her. And they start, oh, Pastor, you have no idea what kind of a woman this is. Oh, well, you're going to start talking now. Well, this deacon of yours, he never prays with us. He never reads the Bible with us. He's a lazy, good for... You know what you got? 2 demons. 2 little devils. That's what started in Genesis 3. It's not mutual appreciation. It's mutual accusation. That's what Satan had Adam and Eve do. Adam, what did you do? It wasn't me, it was the woman that you gave me. And he looks like the devil. That's what sin does. Now, let's just look quickly at how this text goes back and forth. I'm just going to explain the figures and we got to have our break here. Verses 12 to 14. While the king was on his couch, it's described he's reclining like we did at the restaurant yesterday where we had lunch, as many of you have done here in Korea. You either sit at a little table or some because they got bad backs and bad knees, kind of reclined at the table like Jesus at the Last Supper. My nard, that's an obsolete term for perfume, gave forth its fragrance. What does she say? He can't get me out of his thoughts. They say that the olfactory nerve, the sense of smell, is the strongest to promote memories. There are smells that you have experienced that immediately transport you 20, 30 years past. She says, my beloved is to me a sachet of myrrh that lies between my breasts. She's not saying that he is lying between her breasts or having relations. That's not what the text is saying. Just like he can't stop thinking about her, she can't stop thinking about him. They didn't take so many baths back then. And so what they would do is the women would perfume flower petals or something, and they'd let it hang here, and it would cover up other smells. What she's saying is he is the Chanel number 5 of my life. I went to the duty free and I bought everything he got. He can't stop thinking about me. My beloved is to me a cluster of henna blossoms in the vineyards of En-Gedi. What is that? It's the same thing he said about her. I only have eyes for him. What she's saying is he is an oasis. En-Gedi is an oasis. In the middle rocks and arid desert. He is a bouquet of flowers when all the other men are just sand. That's what he said. He said she's a mare in the middle of Pharaoh's stables. She says he's an oasis in my life. The appreciation grows. Now he responds. His words are always less than hers, but they go right to the heart. He says this, behold, you are beautiful, my love. Behold, you are beautiful. Your eyes are doves. 2 times he says she's beautiful. 9 times in the book he says, you are beautiful. That is important for women to hear. Man, if you have not learned that yet, you are in big trouble. Do you think this dress makes me look fat? Oh, no, you look skinny. That's what you need to say. You know that already, right? But you need to be truthful and help as much as you can. She says 1 time in the entire book that he is beautiful. That's not so important to us. 9 times he calls her beautiful, and 3 other times the women of Jerusalem call her beautiful. But then he says, some Bibles say your eyes are like doves. The word like is not in the text. He says your eyes are doves. They transmit peace. Once again, we've got beauty and character side by side. The perfect formula. You inspire tranquility. Now it's your turn. And she, for the only time in the entire book, says, behold, you are beautiful, my beloved, truly, excuse me, yeah, it's her, she's responding, truly delightful. Her praise is met by his praise. Here's what we have, folks. 1 woman, 1 man. 1 woman who only has eyes for 1 man. 1 man who only has eyes for 1 woman. 1 woman. This is the challenge of our day. Everything in our world is fighting to make us men of many women. And even to make women of many men. That is not God's formula for success in marriage. I only have eyes for you. Beauty is in the eyes of the beholder. The greatest threat, perhaps today, to marriages is the internet. I love the internet. Withdraw from the internet. We go to our room doesn't have internet, so we've been getting online here and talking to our kids and seeing videos of Hadassah, our granddaughter, and our daughters taking care of her. And we live connected, but it's a danger. You know this. But how big a danger is it? Let me share with you some recent statistics. The last year that we had accurate statistics, I was right. You got it, girl. Tim Cowles in his site, in the article, 10 ugly numbers describing pornography use in 2017. The largest pornographic site in the world, and there are millions, but 1 site alone registered 4.6 billion hours of access in 2016, the equivalent of 524,000 years of pornographic videos. 92 billion pornographic videos, the equivalent of 12.5 videos for every person in the world in 2016 in 1 site. I don't know about you, but I feel like I've got my head in the sand. This is war. Perhaps worst of all, children under 10 years of age accounted for 22% of all the pornography that was watched by those under 18, which is a vast percentage itself of the pornography that goes through the internet. 22% of that was watched by children under 10 years of age. We cannot let our guard down. The mutual appreciation, I only have eyes for you, has to be the theme of Christian marriage. She continues describing the context in which they found themselves. Our couch is green, the beams of our house are cedar, our rafters are pine. She still is pining for her beau. But then she says this in chapter 2, verse 1. Just a couple more minutes if I can. We are finished. the famous verse of the book of Song of Solomon. She says this, but it's been so poorly interpreted. I am a rose of Sharon, a lily of the valleys. But we try to attribute that to Jesus, but we need to understand, first off, the rose is not a rose. It's a crocus. Even the word crocus doesn't sound very good. Crocus. I'm a crocus. Jesus is not a crocus. A crocus is just a common flower that sprouts in springtime. Some translations, the only other time this word was used is Isaiah 35:1. It describes a crocus, or some translate it tulip. I think they would be the Calvinists. She says, I'm just a common valley flower. There's beauty, but it's nothing special. I'm just a lily among so many other lilies. Now that phrase on her part leads him to his second declaration of appreciation. This is not Jesus. Jesus is not a common valley flower. He says this, oh no! As a lily among brambles, thorn bushes, so is my love among the young women, or perhaps better, the daughters. He says, no, you are not just some everyday flower among the valley. You are like an only lily when all the other women are bramble bushes. This guy's really good with his words. But we men need to learn a lesson too. We need to study our lives. In marriage, we're constantly changing. But beauty is in the eyes of the beholder. We don't have the same electric shock now after so many years of marriage where we grab the hand of our wife like the first time, or the first time we hug, or the first kiss. I'll stop there. We may not get that same response today, but our love deepens and our appreciation should deepen. That's going to happen in the world. He sees her as unique. It's the same idea as the mare among the stables, as the oasis among the desert. Now she responds. And she says the same thing. The DNA of love. As an apple tree among so many trees of the forest, so is my beloved among the sons, the young man. With great delight I sat in his shadow, and his fruit was sweet to my taste. This is the second time that she says he's unique. He is like a flowering, fruitful apple tree when all the other men are just trees. He provides protection. She who worked in the burning sun in the vineyards discovered in his love protection, relief, and fruitfulness. Now here's a lesson for us men, and a lesson for women. God has called us men to be protectors. That's what we do. We protect the one we love. She found shade and protection. It is the greatest tragedy when the one who God has called, love protects the beloved, when the one who has been called to protect is the very one who abuses, who mistreats, who denigrates, who speaks evil, who strikes, who uses, who manipulates. The soul of a woman shrinks when that man whom God called to be her protector, like Eve in the presence of Adam, is the very one who points his finger in her nose and exposes her to death before the holy gaze of God. God has called men to be protectors, and he's called women to find protection in their husbands. We've got lessons, all of us, to learn. She finishes saying this. He brought me to the banqueting table, the banqueting house. Literally, he brought me to the bar. No, not to the bar, to the house of wine. Would have been the palace at a banquet. And his banner over me was love. Again, I'm sorry, but it's not Jesus yet in this passage. What she's saying is, love for me is not secret. It's not hidden. He makes it plain and obvious to all who can see that he loves me. And then she cries out, sustain me with raisins, refresh me with apples, for I am sick with love. His left hand under my head, and his right hand embraces me. It can also be translated, may his left hand be under me, may his right hand embrace me. What she's describing is what she so desires, intimacy with her beloved. This is realistic. It's right. But it's not time. And so the patience of love culminates in this expression of desire for the right time with the right person in the right way. I adjure you, O daughters of Jerusalem, who have become your friends, by the gazelles and the doves of the field, that you not stir up or awaken love until it pleases. Oh, I so desire our wedding day, but it's not time. Wait. Patience. These animals of the field are so easily startled. You approach with care. And so the book opens, talking about the seasons of love. The DNA of mutual appreciation, which has no reason to end. We've only been together. Well, we've been together these 2 times, Larry and Bonnie. But if you spend any time with them, they are encouragers. And they love each other. And then you hear her praising him and him praising her. It makes you sick. No, it doesn't make sense. It's wonderful. It's beautiful. 49 years. Is that right? That's God's grace. That's Christ being lived out in a husband-wife relationship, each for the other and both for God. The marriage itself is not the center, the end of all things, but it's together to serve. And the mutual appreciation grows. That's how it should be. And that's how we when we come back tonight, we will follow the wedding procession all the way to the wedding day. And all of that to be followed by the realism of how do we deal with conflict in marriage. But that's another story for another day. I went over, I'm sorry, I hate doing that, but we can figure it out, right?
It was well worth going over.